Welcome to The Odd Show, where the G is silent and represents a God who is sometimes difficult to see in the world that we live in. Join the discussion as we try to figure out how to live as Christians in that place of tension created by a world that doesn't quite get us and a church that often reacts rather than acting out of compassion. Now, here's your hosts, Bruce Pagano and Thomas Hogan. Hey, welcome to The Odd Show. As you can see, this is not Thomas, even though our intro says your host, Bruce and Thomas. Not Thomas. Actually, the the better person than Thomas, because my wife and then Thomas.
It's a regular misconception.
Yeah. People think that it's the other way around. It's not. I assure you. And because I'm a Christian, publicly speaking, I think I'm obligated to introduce her as my smoking hot wife, Sarah. And you've seen her before on the wives episode with Thomas's wife, Angie. So reason Thomas isn't here is, one, he lives in Utah, but two, we thought it'd be a really awesome idea to do a husband-wife episode and then actually do two husband-wife episodes. So this episode is Sarah and I, and next episode will be Thomas and Angie. And they'll address and answer other questions and issues that we don't cover. So some of you that are watching probably know that I sent you a message and was just like, hey, what would you talk to a new couple or a married couple that's coming to you for advice? What things would you talk to them about? And I got some awesome responses. I'm not going to share names of the people that sent stuff in, but man, it was really great. Like we have some awesome friends. We have like smart friends and creative friends and godly friends, and they're thinking awesome. They exceeded my expectations so much. So we got a ton of topics to talk about, but I think we're only going to get through three. And in the sake of good Christendom, we alliterated them, and we're going to talk about coitus, communication, and comparing. So I know many of you don't like the word coitus, so I'm going to keep saying coitus until you get over the fear of coitus. But actually, our friend that sent in that topic actually coined her own word and called and said sexpectations, or expectations surrounding sex and marriage, which was awesome. But we couldn't alliterate that with the other two, so that's what we did. So we're going to talk about that, but I think you probably said that we're going to open, somebody brought up dating. And since we've been married, my view of dating has changed significantly, has evolved. It hasn't changed, it's evolved a little bit. So, I mean, do you want to open like the importance of dating? I know.
Well, our story is that we were friends for a year, for over a year. About a year?
No, not even close.
Not even a year? No, before we started dating, we knew each other.
For 6 months.
Oh, for 6 months. Okay, felt like longer.
June to December.
Yeah. Before we started dating, and then we only dated for, December to March. So 4 months.
Well, we got engaged in March, right?
Yep. So we dated for 4 months, and then we were engaged for 2 months before we got married. So it all happened really. Yeah. Okay, we weren't together for very long.
We got married a month after we got engaged. The end of April.
Yeah.
In the end of March, we were.
Okay.
When did we get engaged? Indeed. We were talking about
March
marriage
4th.
like on our first date.
Yeah. Well, before we even started dating, God told us individually that we would marry each other.
And not in that creepy, like, I'm supposed to marry you. And you're like, I don't even know you. Not in that way. But in some very...
Well, we didn't tell each other, no.
Right.
Like, when God told us separately that...
we are who he had for each other. Right.
We didn't communicate that to each other at all. Only after we started dating did we talk about that.
Right.
But when just one morning during my devotional time, I just felt God, he didn't use the words like, you're going to marry Bruce. He just spotlighted him. And I was going through a divorce, and so I said, nope, not right now. I'm not going to think about it. And it just kept coming back every time I prayed. And so,
The real part of that story is that she was head over heels the first time she saw me. So
no, I wasn't. I was head over heels for
yes, she
God.
was.
Anyway, so I just let it simmer and sit on the back burner and let God do what He wanted to do. But it all happened very, very quickly once it started happening, and
Hmm.
it couldn't have happened any other way. It was completely God's will, because after we got married, he got orders to Japan and then left 6 months after we
Like
got married.
quick.
Yeah, a month after we got married, you got the orders, right? Really
Um,
soon after we got married.
right.
So it couldn't have happened any other way, but because it happened quickly, it just kind of contributed to growing pains in the beginning.
Right. And my thing for I know we're already like 5 minutes in, but that's okay. My thing
You
for
always talk way longer than that.
no, I
We'll
know,
be fine.
but we have 3 issues. And Thomas and I never stick to that. We had to boil it down to one issue because
All right.
we never made it to the other. Anyway, but our like my side of that was I was going through some stuff in my life where I was trying to figure out, trying to be obedient to God in some areas, and mine was like I knew I wanted to date Sarah. Um, that I was that we had a lot in common. That I was interested. I enjoyed being around her. But it was October, a couple months before we started dating. Just Sarah introduced me to Death Cab for Cutie, and my life's never been the same. But there's just a particular song that was kind of apropos at the time because I was actually called What Sarah Said, ironically, not ironically, coincidentally. And the whole premise is who do you love enough to sit and watch die, essentially. And at the time, I actually had a friend that was dying from leukemia and would sit in his hospital room 2 or 3 times a week and just watch his wife sit there. And probably a week before he died, um, it just kind of swelled up in me and just really felt like God was like, who would you want sitting there? Like, ask me the question, like, who would you want sitting there? And the very immediate answer was, I would want Sarah sitting there. So, and a couple months later, we started dating. Probably should have been a little bit sooner. Sarah was just like, what is wrong with him? Why won't he ask me out?
He was trying to play hard to get, and I was just like, don't play too hard to get, because I'm not the kind of way.
I was trying to, what's the shoot Christian say where he's just like, I'm just trying to care for her heart. Just trying to care for her heart. So that was our story. And at the time, when we first started dating, I was leading college ministry, and I really thought, like, I had it in my head. I had heard this sermon, and I had it in my head that, like, within 6 months of dating, there's this point where about 6 months into dating, you should know whether or not you want to be with that person. Like, you could see yourself with that person. And at the time in my head, I thought, well, if that's the case, like if within 6 months then marry them. Like 6 months, within 6 months, you guys should be married. Like there shouldn't be any reason for that. Since then, I've grown. We've talked. Our marriage has kind of helped season that. And since then, I still think that within 6 months of dating someone, of beginning to date someone, you should know whether or not you could see yourself with this person long term. And that should kind of be the break point where you're like, yeah, I want to continue growing with and knowing this person. Or, man, this last 6 months has been really difficult. We're probably not, and just call it what it is. End it. Don't give the whole, it's not you, it's me, but just be like, hey, like, let's be honest about the last 6 months. We're probably not going to grow together in a healthy way, and just end it. And if God does does something different, then be obedient to that. But if after 6 months you're like, man, I really see myself with this person, date for a long time. Date. The longer you can date and maintain the purity of your relationship, growing deeply together, respect and honor for each other, the longer you can
Mm-hmm.
date and maintain
Trust
those things,
building.
trust building, like the better it is. The more you get to know each other, the more those opportunities to talk about things that you wouldn't even think about initially in dating will come up. You'll be able to build trust. You build um, important levels of intimacy before you get to the physical act of intimacy, which we'll talk about here in a second. Um, so just date the crap out of each other. Just date. And that's kind of my view on it now. And I think we kind of
I
talked
agree.
about it and we agree on it. So the first issue kind of leading into that is expectations. And um, man, there's this expectation. I know that you and a lot of your girlfriends have talked about in women's groups and stuff. Like, there's this expectation placed on the wedding night. Like, we've saved ourselves, and the wedding night's gonna be awesome. And ours was, but
Ours was because we already know what to do.
right.
I mean,
No, yeah,
honestly,
yeah.
we already knew what to do. Growing up in high school, so much emphasis was placed on your wedding night and you're a virgin and how beautiful it's gonna be and how amazing and of course, yes, but
Not a lot of honesty and
not a lot of not a lot of transparency, not a lot of no
disclosure.
realness. Yeah, disclosure. Half the girls that I know on their wedding night needed to get drunk because
Or they were sad, or they were
or
scared.
terrified.
Right.
I mean, for a woman losing her virginity is not just this easy peasy thing, but not only the physical change of being deflowered, um, the mentality that a woman has to get into to become vulnerable for a person who she has not yet opened herself up to in that way is it's it's intimidating. That's the least way I can put it. It takes a lot of trust and it takes a lot of communication. And if there are sex expectations, I think it would do well for leaders in the church, men and women, to communicate with the soon to be married people that they need to talk about sex before they have sex.
Right.
That never happens. You
And
don't
not
talk
in,
about sex before you have sex
not
because
in
then you
a
might want to
hey,
have
we're gonna
sex.
have sex way. like hey, we'll have sex, and that's the topic.
I mean, maybe have leaders there to help.
But I mean, like more in depth than we're gonna have sex. We know that we're gonna have sex, right?
Yeah.
Um, yeah. So, and on the guy side of that, like, there's not, even if you don't know what to do, um, there's, I feel like, and and not in a, there's no, it's not difficult for men type way, but I feel like there's a lot more difficulty for women in it. Um, because I mean, everyone, like, guys just have to be in the room to be to be in the mood, and there's some truth in that. There's a lot of truth in that, but women, there's this deeper thing going on. So like when we first got married, we knew what to do physically, like we knew the physical act, um, but we had not cultivated these deeper areas of intimacy that led to um,
That affected.
that led to a trusting and the ability to trust in the physical and be vulnerable in the physical intimacy aspect of it. Because here's the thing for me, and I'll just put it out front there: physical intimacy, the act of sex, um, but in addition to that, physical touch and affection, and that's just the culmination of intimacy built in the other areas of your life together. So in the spiritual area, like do you have spiritual intimacy? Do you have emotional intimacy? Do you have there's another one I wrote on it, but spiritual, emotional, and intellectual intimacy. Have you shared your life and grown intimate and deeply in those areas? And if you have, the natural culmination of that is physical intimacy, like physical touch and the act of sex. And we had not, because it happened so quick for us, and because we brought a lot of baggage of our own individually into marriage, we had not had an opportunity to build that stuff out. So when we started talking about it, a lot of issues came up.
Yeah.
One of
Yes,
the main
that's a
issues,
nice segue
right?
into one of the main issues that I had was my expectation of sex within a marriage is that I have been taught my whole life my body belongs to my husband. And the Bible does say, your body is not your own. And doesn't it say that your husband's body is not his own? It
Yeah.
belongs to the wife and the wife's body. That's true, yes. But I think because sex is not an open topic in the church, besides the pretty flowery Christianese stuff, I really struggled with um, the idea that my body is not my own. If he wants sex, he can demand it, and if I don't give it to him, then I'm a bad wife.
As part of
I'm
your
not a good
wifely
Christian.
duties, right?
It was my wifely duty. And even more so as a mom, because as a mom, you give your body to your children. You grow a child inside of you, and for some women, you feed them from your body and you grow them from your body, and then they hang on you all day. Like my body, I felt before this was corrected, I literally felt like I had no claim on any part of myself. My body was my husband's when he asked for it. My body was my children to give them life and when they demanded it. And it created the most unsettling conflict in my heart and my mind, so that I was just this grouchy, dark, twisty ball of anxiety and angst all the time. And that affected our intimacy, because I became bitter. And actually, it was for my birthday, right, when we went to Fuji Q, and we finally I just broke down, and I just spilled it all out crying, like, this is what I'm feeling. And he was like, oh,
And
I had no idea that.
to be fair, like, obviously I didn't know, but I'm a touchy guy. Like, so just walking by her, I'd touch her, and um, you know, which made it like, and I couldn't understand. She would tell me like, I don't want to be touched, and I'm like, I'm not trying to have sex with you. I just want to touch you, but I couldn't understand what was going on, and I probably wasn't because of my baggage that I brought. I was trapped in this, well, she's rejecting me mindset. And it just made me angry and grouchy and bitter, where I was just like, how's my wife going to reject me? And had I been more patient and tried to understand where she was coming from, and more open conversation and all that, it probably would have been a little bit sooner, maybe. I don't know. Maybe it wouldn't have been. But I mean, it culminated. We have a 8-year-old low crawling behind the couch because we told him.
Well, and even just not very long ago, I was finally, we've been married 6 years, and I was finally able to put it into words just a few weeks ago when I told him, like, I wish I had been more open to your touches in the beginning, because now I want them. Now I like them. And now they make me feel like a woman and wanted. But at the time, because of my previous marriage and experience with sex, touching, intimate touching, any kind of touching was just an extension of masturbation. It was just me being used as an object for pleasure and not a recipient of love and intimacy.
I have to give this an explicit check because you said masturbation.
Oh,
I'm just
sorry. Vagina, breasts, penis. Like, come on, guys. We're adults. Anyway, so it's still an evolving relationship, and we're still trying to figure out how to communicate to each other those expectations. But the one thing she said was like, how often?
But even still, like, yeah, that's a fair. So this is what our friend said. She said sex expectations. I just made up that word. She was pretty proud of that, and I was like,
I'm very proud of you.
That was solid. She said, but I think it's good for couples to talk about what their expectations are for sex, what it looks like, how often, physical and emotional needs surrounding it, etc. I think it's also good to get into the habit of being comfortable about talking about sex. If you start your marriage being afraid to openly talk about sex, it could lead to a lot more issues. Um, and I, for me, like I think you should be able to talk about like, well, I would like to have sex this many times. Um,
You can say you'd like to, but that doesn't mean you're gonna.
right, but understanding it's a conversation. Um, it's a conversation.
Yeah.
It's not a like, hey, we should be having sex, and this will lead into a comparison because
Well, and just
um,
can I say one thing? Going into, and we said that at the very beginning of our relationship, we would like to not have sex. We would like to not
go
go more than 1 or 2 days without being intimate, which sounded great as a newlywed. Yeah, like totally, we could totally do that. And then you get pregnant, and then you have a baby, and then
well, and just kids, not even the pregnant part because pregnant was awesome.
pregnancy was awesome.
Uh,
Not for everyone. Don't make an
right,
expectation.
but kids are
No.
rude when
Yeah.
you want to be intimate. Like
Yeah.
they are selfish, and we should talk about that. But we love our kids. But it's just their nature. Like they just want to.
Right.
Like they know something's going on that I'm not a part of, and I should interrupt it. So I mean,
Just
you're tired. You're like,
let your expectations be fluid. They can change from one thing to another, and that's fine as long as you're communicating. Like, this is what I feel right
no
now.
more. Please go downstairs.
Um,
No.
This is like, now there's a new season in my life. What do you think about this? And just communicate with each
Right.
other. Just don't get grumpy because you haven't had sex in 2 days and that's what you decided at the beginning of your marriage, even though your wife is breastfeeding around the clock. Just talk.
Right.
That didn't happen to us. I'm just saying.
No. For example. But I mean, also like I think having those conversations before you get married are beneficial to your marriage, and it kind of puts it out there so that you can start putting some perspective and really it brings out other things. Like it brings out like, oh man, I really
It
need to
brings
deal
up
with this.
so much. Sex has a way of bringing up more than just.
And that was
I think God designed it like that.
right, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and I think that's the importance of the physical act of intimacy.
Yeah.
Is that it is, like I said, meant to be a culmination of all those other areas of intimacy that you've cultivated and sown with each other. And I think that was the biggest, so many times Sarah was just like early in our marriage, all guys want is sex. And really we had to talk.
That's what you're told growing
Right.
up. Stay away from that boy. All he wants is sex.
Right.
Well,
And I would argue it's not all they want, but it's a big part of what they want. But
what I learned from you is that it's not just, yes, they want the physical act of coming together, but for Bruce, he wants to be intimate with my soul as well as my body, and he wants to have my heart. And I mean, some of the best communication we have is right after sex. And so he's told me over and over, and it finally started sinking in. I finally started believing him when he said, I don't just want the act of sex, I want to be close to you, and that is a way to do it.
yes. And that kind of leads into comparing, because I know that guys are less apt to talk about comparing sex. They're not going to talk about
Which
anything
is funny
deep.
to me, because my friends and I talk about
Well, they
sex
joke
all the
about
time.
they joke about sex, but it's too deeply intimate of an issue. So guys will joke about sex, but talk about like other things that like are not as deep.
My experience is that women have no problem going into detail.
Right. So, but how? So in the aspect of comparing, how does that affect just your marriage in general? Like I know sex is one of those things that you might compare. Like, oh, because I know you've come home and been like, man, like women are like do it 3 times or a week, or we don't do it enough. I haven't done it in a year. Whatever.
All the conversations I've had with my girlfriends about sex, there is comparing, but not in the sense of like, not bad comparing, good comparing. Like, I don't know, if I just weaned Hazel, so breastfeeding is going to be a big issue, or topic. But, I have mom friends who were at the same place in their journey as I was, and we would like, "How was it for you?" "Well, I have no sex drive at all." "Really? I do." So just comparing, but not comparing, and
But I mean, I
you
remember
can
you coming home and being like, having said that there were girlfriends of yours that were just like, um, man, like they hear people talk about how good things are,
Mhm.
and it really frustrates them that
Oh
theirs
yeah,
is not that good, or it's different, and they just view it as, well, it's not that, so it must not be good. And not just sex, but just in general, like
yeah.
just
I think comparing can be a dangerous thing.
yeah,
Parenting, bodies, jobs, houses. I mean, literally, you can compare anything, but there's a difference between comparing because you want to prove that you're dissatisfied with what you have or finding a norm. You
right.
can compare to find a norm, and I think I could be wrong, but I think that's healthy.
No, yeah,
Like
absolutely. So our
you're
our friend had said, she had brought up comparing, that her and her husband were constantly comparing themselves as a married couple to other married
mm,
couples, and it caused a lot of grief and
mhm,
strife and frustration, and a lot of issues. Um, and she said that, um, instead of enjoying each other, and finding what worked for them as a couple, they found that they were trying to adhere to this strict list of rules, and how we thought we should behave instead of how God wanted us to behave as a couple, and what ultimately worked best for us. But once we found our own groove, we found that a lot of our interactions were very similar to what other people were doing, but they were special. Like it was in their own style.
mhm,
Like it was, and all of a sudden, it wasn't this comparative thing that was
yeah,
dangerous to their marriage, where they were trying to set these rules for their marriage, but they were able to live in their own style. And especially if you have kids, like, um, or you're early on in your marriage, or you're just getting married and you're trying to figure out, like, using people as points of reference are probably good, but using them as the model for how you
right,
and your couple or you and your significant other and your family should perform is probably not okay.
yeah. And I think it's a boundary easily crossed, and if you cross it,
Right. Yeah.
no big deal. Just
Right.
recognize what you've done and try to renew your thinking into that, finding the norm rather than
Right.
proving you're that you're discontent and you want what someone else has, because really comparison is a sister to envy and jealousy.
Yeah. That's good. I mean, that's probably the whole grass is always greener on the other side of the
Yeah.
fence type thing. You get in that mentality, and just a dangerous place to be. Um, and there's tons of cliches that follow that, but I mean,
For
like,
me, finding that norm um, is very comforting. I like knowing that I'm not the only person having problems. Not problems. I like knowing that I'm not the only person with this particular struggle,
right,
and that so and so had this struggle, but look, they got over it, so we can get
right,
over it. And it's not the same as like, well, their marriage is great. Well, because I don't really know their marriage, I don't know what happens. I only see what they come to whatever social gathering with, and that's not 100% who they are.
right.
So
So point of reference versus,
yeah,
model to follow.
yeah,
Um, that's not comparing. That was easy,
that was easy.
and we figured that out for you guys. Good luck. If you follow our three-point plan for comparison, you will be successful. And then the last one that we were going to talk about was communication, the importance of communication.
Which
This
we've kind of sewn
kind of,
that in
yeah,
all
sewn
throughout.
that in throughout, but this was a last minute, just squeaked in underneath us doing this video. One of my buddies sent that in. Um, but he had mentioned, um, the importance of communicating early in your relationship, often throughout your relationship, learning the right ways to communicate with each other. Um,
Which I think is key. I was going to bring books, but I forgot until just now. We have completely different ways of communicating. Bruce is a, what is it called?
out, outward.
he processes everything outward. He talks everything through, and I am external processor, and
Right.
I'm an internal processor. So we used to get in arguments, and he would just say everything that he felt, and I'd just sit there quiet because I had to take it all in, and I had to process it, and I had to, talk myself down, or pray, or talk myself up, and just figure out really what I felt rather than just go off my initial reaction. We have different ways of apologizing. We have different love languages. We have,
And the key for love languages is, yes, knowing yours is important, but learning your spouse's
yeah.
is more important. I mean, really, it's the equivalent to going to on a long term mission trip to China and never learning Mandarin.
hmm
Like, how do you communicate with the people
We
that
lived
you're
in
trying to
Japan, and
serve?
you never learned Japanese.
I wasn't trying to serve the Japanese. I was there to protect the military base, and it was funner to say words wrong.
And embarrass me.
And embarrass my wife. But she did take the time to learn and would often correct me. And to be fair, I had an interpreter that was employed by the U.S. Air Force that I could go to and be like, "Hey, what this dude say?" So, but if you're serving someone, as in missions or in, I don't know, your marriage, in Christian community, learning their language, learning how to speak that language is not um, a privilege or not a suggestive thing. It's actually necessary. Like, it's a critical part of effective communication is learning to speak that other person's language.
And if you're struggling with communication, I really recommend picking up those books that we just referenced. Those Five Love Languages, the
Boundaries by Cloud, is that Dr. Cloud? Is a great book.
Languages of Apology.
5 Languages of Apology.
And then maybe just taking a personality test so you know how you process. You probably know if you process internally or externally. Yeah.
I mean, that was one of our things. We really had to get to a point where, where
we
she
still
said
do.
she,
We still struggle with it.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, I had to get to a point where I learned I can't just talk. Like, I can't just, because even though I was processing it, it made Sarah feel like I was beating her down, like I was browbeating her, and I wasn't trying to. Like, I wasn't trying to. I really was just trying to figure out what I felt. And at the same time,
you thought I was ignoring you, and I really wasn't.
Right.
I just felt saturated with information, and I needed to.
Oh, and that's the other thing that I want to say. Like, our expectations for communicating were different too. So, like, we, there's all these like, well, set a date to talk about it, and so we would say, all right, we're going to talk when I get home from work, and my expectation was right when I got home from work, we were going to talk. And Sarah's like, well, I haven't had a chance to think through it. And I'm like, you've had 10 hours. How have you not? But she also had kids at the house, and stuff that she was doing. So clear communication in when you're going to communicate and how you're going to communicate is important. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, man, great episode. That was
easy.
Yeah, that was easy, man. Again, we would love to, as the Odd Show, we're always open for dialogue. Like I said in the message when I put it out, we're not experts in marriage. We've been married 6 years. We have 4 kids. We both have a divorce, previous marriage. We've messed up a lot of stuff, and we still are trying to figure things out, sporadically throughout our marriage. But the thing is that we're figuring them out together, and we're unified on that.
And we're available if other people need.
Yeah.
If you need help, if you have questions, if you need prayer, if you just need a point of reference so you know what's normal, we're totally available.
Right. So with that said, we're always open for discussion. We're always open for suggestion. If you didn't agree with something or you think that it needs to be expounded on, let us know. Go to the Odd Show website, which is theoddshow.com. You can add us on, or at me on Twitter, at odd_show. Both those words, odd, have a G in it, so it's spelled G-O-D-D. The G is silent.
I still call it the God Show.
Yeah. She makes the other D silent. But there's also email. You can email us. You can email me. and I'll put that on the well, you can email me at at Bruce at theoddshow.com. Maybe I'll add Sarah's email to the show notes if you want to check that out. But that's it. Love that we get to do this. Love when I get to have Sarah on the show, or when she gets. Well, this is the first time I've gotten to have her on the show, but second show she's done, and people always love hearing from the wives. So maybe this will happen more often. And next week will be Thomas and Angie, and they will have some awesome stuff to talk about. But in the meantime, love you guys. Hit us up on the website and on Twitter. And as always, stay odd. Thanks. Thanks for checking out The Odd Show. You can follow Bruce on Twitter at bpags2 and Thomas at BlenderZen. Remember to rate and review us on iTunes and share us with your friends. Until next time, stay odd.